He grew up in a mansion with everything money could buy. But one thing was always missing: his father. Every time he asked his mother, he got the same cold answer. He's not part of our lives. For years, he wondered. For years, he felt that empty space. Until one night, sick with a high fever, he noticed something on the butler's neck. A birthmark. The exact same one he had. That moment changed everything. What he discovered after would turn his world upside down. Before we continue with this story, don't forget to subscribe to the channel and like the video. Oh, and don't forget to comment below where you're watching us from. We'd love to know that. Noah was a 6-year-old boy who lived in a very big and expensive house with his mother, Victoria. Victoria was a billionaire and gave Noah everything money could buy. Huge rooms full of toys, games, and even a private playground in the backyard. The house had many workers, people who cooked, cleaned, and took care of everything. But even with all these things, Noah didn't feel happy. He didn't feel complete. Every time he looked around the house, he noticed someone important was missing: his dad. He didn't know who he was or where he went. Whenever he asked Victoria about him, his mother would simply say, "He's not part of our lives." That was it. No more answers, no details. Noah didn't understand why he wasn't allowed to know more. Everyone avoided talking about him. Even though he had so much, it always felt like something big was missing from his world. Among all the workers in the mansion, there was one person Noah liked the most: Albert. He wasn't just another employee. He was the one who gave him his meals, told him bedtime stories, and even hugged him when he felt sad. Albert smiled a lot, but Noah could tell that behind his smile, he was hiding something. Sometimes when he asked him simple questions like, "Did my dad look like me?" or "Did you know him?" Albert would pause and change the subject. His eyes would get wet like he wanted to cry, but he never did. Noah noticed how he looked at him, almost like he cared more than anyone else did. But he also felt he was holding something back, like he wanted to tell him something but wasn't allowed. This made Noah even more confused.
Why would someone who cared so much hide things from him?
He trusted him more than anyone, but even he wouldn't give him the answers he needed. Noah didn't have any friends to talk to, wasn't allowed to leave the mansion, and other kids never visited. Every day felt the same. He would play alone, eat alone, and wonder alone. The toys were fun for a while, but without someone to share them with, they quickly became boring. He tried asking Victoria again about his father during dinner one night. "Why don't I have a dad like the other kids?" he asked. Victoria didn't even look up from her food. "He doesn't matter. It's all you need to know." Noah stared at her, hoping for more, but his mother didn't say anything else. That night he asked Albert again. He held his hand, took a deep breath, and said softly, "Sometimes people we love aren't here anymore, Noah." But he didn't understand what that meant. Was his dad gone forever? Was he dead? Or did he just leave him? No one would say anything clearly, and that made everything worse. At night, Noah often had strange dreams. In these dreams, he would see a man with soft eyes and warm hands. He never spoke, but he always smiled at him. Sometimes he would reach out like he wanted to hug him, but then he would fade away. When Noah woke up, he always felt empty, like someone he loved had just disappeared. He would lie in bed, holding his pillow tightly, trying to remember the man's face. Was that his dad? He didn't know. It was the same dream over and over again. He started to wonder if his mind was showing him what he missed most. Maybe his heart was trying to tell him something. Every time he dreamed about the man, he would wake up with questions. Why couldn't he see him clearly? Why did no one tell him the truth? His days were filled with silence, and his nights were full of mystery. One morning, Noah walked through the hallway and stopped at the large photo wall near the stairs. It had pictures of Victoria at events with important-looking people in fancy places, but there were no pictures of Noah's dad. None, not even one. He checked the photo albums in the library, but it was the same thing. He was nowhere to be found. It was like he never existed. He went to Albert and asked again, "Why aren't there any pictures of my dad?" Albert gave him a long hug, but didn't answer. Instead, he said, "You are so loved, Noah. That's what matters." But Noah didn't agree. He needed to know who he was and where he came from. He started to feel that everyone around him was keeping a secret, a big one, and it was about his own life. He promised himself that one day he would find out the truth, even if no one wanted to help him. That night, like so many others before, Noah lay in his bed, feeling alone. The room was quiet, the lights were dim, and he looked up at the ceiling, thinking about the man in his dreams. He felt familiar, like someone he should have known but never met. He tried to stay awake, hoping that maybe if he stayed up the dreams wouldn't come. But slowly his eyes closed, and once again he saw him. He was standing far away in a place he didn't recognize, holding out his arms as if waiting for him. He tried to run to him, but no matter how fast he moved, he stayed just out of reach. Then, like always, he faded away. Noah woke up with tears in his eyes and a feeling of emptiness in his chest. The mansion was quiet again. Victoria was asleep. Albert was downstairs. Noah sat up in bed, staring at the darkness, still a boy full of questions, still without answers. Victoria was not only rich, she was also strict. She liked to control everything inside the mansion. Nothing happened without her permission. She decided what food was served, how the staff dressed, when they worked, and even what they were allowed to say. One rule was very clear: no one was allowed to talk about Noah's father. It's not even a word. Victoria had made this rule clear to every worker. If anyone broke it, they would lose their job right away. She didn't care who it was. She didn't want the name of Noah's father mentioned in the house. This made everyone nervous. Albert, the butler who cared for Noah like a second father, followed the rule, even though it hurt him inside. Every day he watched Noah grow up with questions no one was allowed to answer. He wanted to speak the truth, but he was scared. He didn't want to lose his job, or worse, be separated from the boy he loved like a son. Albert wasn't the only one who felt bad. Many of the workers looked uncomfortable around Noah. He began to notice it more and more. When he entered a room, people would stop talking. If he asked a question that was even close to being about his father, they would freeze, smile awkwardly, and quickly change the subject. One day, Noah saw two maids whispering in the hallway. As he walked closer, they stopped, looked at him, and walked away without finishing their sentence. Noah felt confused. It was like everyone was hiding something from him. He wasn't just imagining things. Something strange was going on, and he was sure it had to do with his dad. He didn't understand why no one wanted to talk to him about it. He felt lonely, like he was walking through a place where everyone wore a mask. He was just a kid, but even he could feel the pressure in the air. Noah decided to try another way. One afternoon, while walking through the kitchen, he stopped to speak to the head cook, Sophia. She had always been kind to him. "Sophia," he asked, "do you know anything about my dad?" Her hands, which had been chopping vegetables, suddenly stopped. She looked down, didn't say anything for a few seconds, and then gave a forced smile. "You should ask your mother, dear," she said, without meeting his eyes. Then she picked up the vegetables and turned her back to him. Noah stood there, unsure of what just happened. He felt embarrassed, like he had done something wrong, but he also knew he didn't. He had every right to ask about his own father. Why was everyone so afraid? Why couldn't anyone give him a straight answer? He started to feel like he was surrounded by a wall of silence, and every time he tried to climb it, it got taller. Things got even worse a few days later. There was an older gardener named George who worked on the mansion's large gardens. He had been around since before Noah was born. George always smiled at Noah and sometimes gave him apples from the tree behind the garage. Noah trusted him. One afternoon, while they were walking near the flower beds, Noah asked him quietly, "Did you know my dad?" George stopped walking and looked at Noah. "Yes, but before he could finish, he froze." He looked around quickly, like someone might be watching. The next day, George was gone. His tools were still in the shed, but he never came back. Albert told Noah that George had been let go. No one explained why. Noah knew it was because of what he said. That short sentence, that single word, he had cost George his job. Noah felt guilty, and he also felt angry. What kind of place punished people for telling the truth? After George left, the atmosphere in the house became even heavier. The mansion was big and full of expensive things. But it no longer felt exciting or fun. It felt like a giant prison with golden walls. There were many rooms, but none felt warm. Noah started spending more time alone. He stopped asking questions because he already knew what would happen: silence, fear, or people getting fired. He started to write his thoughts in a little notebook he hid under his bed. He drew pictures of the man from his dreams and wrote questions like, what was his name and why did he leave? He didn't know if he would ever get answers, but writing made him feel less trapped. Sometimes he saw Albert looking at him with sad eyes like he wanted to help, but couldn't. The mansion was beautiful on the outside, but on the inside, it was a place full of secrets, rules, and silence. Noah sat by the window that evening looking out at the garden where George used to work. He watched the wind move the flowers and wondered if things would ever change. He missed George, the stories and the stories and the stories, and feeling that someone was honest with him. Now he felt more alone than ever. He turned his eyes toward the hallway, where he could see the other staff walking quickly, avoiding his gaze. It was clear that Victoria's control reached every corner of the mansion. No one dared to speak freely. Albert walked in with his dinner, placed it gently on the table, and gave him a soft smile. He didn't say anything. Noah didn't ask anything. The silence was stronger now. It filled the room like heavy air. As he picked at his food, he couldn't stop thinking that there was a huge secret in the mansion. And somehow, that secret was about him. Albert couldn't talk about the past, but he could show his love through small things. He was the only person in the house who treated Noah with real care. Every morning he made breakfast just the way he liked it. Warm toast with strawberry jam and a glass of cold orange juice. He knew when he was in a bad mood and gave him space. He read stories before bed, even when he was tired after a long day of work. When Noah got sick, he stayed by his side all night, bringing medicine and wet towels for his forehead. He didn't complain. He never treated him like it was just his job. He looked at him differently than anyone else did. Noah noticed this. One day, while he fixed his blanket, he asked, "Why are you different from the others?" Albert paused. He smiled, but the smile was shaky. Didn't answer. Just patted his forehead gently and walked out of the room. Victoria wasn't blind. She saw the bond between Noah and Albert, and it made her angry. She didn't show it right away, but it was obvious in how she started treating Albert differently. She began giving him extra work more than anyone else. She asked him to clean areas of the house he never had to before, told him to handle extra laundry, and even made him help the cook in the kitchen. It wasn't because he wasn't doing his job. It was because Victoria wanted him away from Noah, she thought. It was dangerous for them to become too close. She didn't like it, but Albert accepted everything in silence. He didn't argue, he just worked harder. Noah noticed that he wasn't around as much and he didn't like it. He started going into the laundry room just to see him folding clothes. He would sit on a stool and talk to him about anything. Even if he barely replied, he just needed him close. Noah began to feel that Albert wasn't just a kind person. He didn't understand everything yet, but something deep inside him said there was more to him. His hugs felt too real. His voice, even when quiet, made him feel safe in a way no one else ever did. He remembered the smallest things, his favorite color, which toy he liked most, even the name of a stuffed animal he lost 2 years ago. No one remembered things like that, not even his mother. It wasn't just love from a butler, it felt like something bigger. Noah began to think, could he be my dad? He never said it out loud. It was just a quiet thought that started to grow in his mind. He looked at his face and tried to find parts of himself there. His eyes, his nose, his smile. Sometimes he would watch him when he didn't notice, looking for a sign. He didn't have proof, but the feeling kept getting stronger. One day, Noah decided to test something. During lunch, while Victoria was away in her office, he told Albert, "If I had a dad, I think he would be like you." Albert froze for a second, holding a spoon in midair. Quickly looked down and said, "That's very sweet, Noah," and nothing more. But Noah saw his eyes. They were wet, like he wanted to cry. He turned his back and started washing dishes. Noah didn't say anything else, but he felt something shift. That night, after everyone went to sleep, he sat by the window in his room and tried to think clearly. What if Albert really was his father? What if that's why Victoria hated their bond? It made sense in a way that nothing else did, but why would he lie? He'd tell him the truth? He had so many questions and no real answers. Still, the thought refused to leave him. It was stuck in his heart now. Victoria noticed that her plan wasn't working, no matter how much she tried to separate them. Noah always found ways to be near Albert. Sometimes he would pretend to be hurt, just so he would come check on him. Other times he'd sit outside the laundry room or sneak into the kitchen just to talk to him. Albert didn't push him away, kept his distance in. Words, but not in actions. He still packed his school bag, tied his shoes, and made sure his room was clean and cozy. Victoria became colder. She gave shorter answers when Noah spoke and didn't join him for dinner as often, but Noah didn't care as much anymore. Albert's kindness mattered more. Didn't want toys or video games. He just wanted to understand the truth. He started writing more in his notebook, drawing pictures of Albert, writing ideas, and even making lists of reasons why he believed he was his father. His mind was full. Even without proof, Noah couldn't shake the feeling that something real connected them, something more than just caregiver and child. He began to trust that his suspicion wasn't just a child's fantasy. It was a growing truth inside him. Every small gesture from Albert, every soft look, every moment he held back tears, it all added up. He wasn't allowed to say it, but his actions spoke louder than words, and he listened. Every day, his belief got stronger. Maybe Victoria was hiding more than just the past. Maybe this was why she didn't want Noah asking questions. Maybe this was why George was fired, why the mansion was filled with silence. Noah had no evidence, but he was sure of one thing now. Albert loved him like a father, and he loved him like a son. As he lay in bed that night, staring at the ceiling, he still didn't have answers, but for the first time, he had a strong feeling. Something big was waiting to be discovered. It started late at night. Noah had been coughing a little during the day, but nobody thought it was serious. By bedtime, though, his face was hot. His body was shaking and he could barely keep his eyes open. Albert was the first to notice something was wrong. He touched his forehead and felt the heat right away. Without waiting, he ran to get a wet towel and a bowl of cold water. He came back quickly and placed the cloth on his head. Noah moved slowly, whispering things that didn't make sense. Albert sat next to him, whispering soft words and humming a quiet tune, hoping it would help him rest. He changed the towel often and brought him water to drink. He stayed beside him, even though it was very late. He didn't leave, not even for a minute. As he adjusted his pillow, some strands of his hair fell over his shoulder, exposing a small dark mark on the side of his neck. Noah, even though he was weak and half asleep, noticed it right away. His tired eyes blinked a few times before he reached out and lightly touched the spot on Albert's neck. His fingers were warm and his hand shook a little. In a soft, sleepy voice, he said, "It's just like mine." Albert froze. He stopped breathing for a second, his eyes wide. He pulled his head back slightly, shocked. Noah slowly turned his head and moved his collar down to show his own neck. There on the side was the same dark birthmark, the same shape in almost the same place. He didn't say much else. He just smiled a little and closed his eyes again. Albert didn't say anything either. He looked down at the boy with tears welling up in his eyes. His hands trembled slightly as he went back to placing a fresh towel on his head. The room was quiet again, but everything had changed in that moment. The next morning, Noah woke up feeling better. His fever had dropped and his head didn't hurt as much. He was still weak, but he could sit up in bed. Albert brought him some tea and sat beside him like usual, but something was different. Noah didn't forget what happened during the night. It wasn't one of those blurry, fevered dreams. He remembered clearly what he saw, remembered touching his neck and seeing the mark that looked just like his own. He looked at Albert carefully. He acted normal, asking how he felt and telling him to drink slowly. But Noah wasn't focused on the tea. He kept staring at the side of his neck, waiting to see the mark again. Albert noticed, of course. He pulled his hair over his shoulder a bit more than usual, hiding the spot. Noah didn't mention it again. Not right away, but the thought stayed in his head all day. Something real had finally shown itself. After that day, Noah paid even more attention. Whenever Albert bent down to pick something up or leaned forward to help him get dressed, he tried to catch a glimpse of his neck. He didn't always see the mark, but when he did, he felt the same thing every time. A strange mix of surprise, hope, and certainty. Stop doubting his thoughts. Before, the idea that Albert could be his father felt like a dream, something his heart wanted but his mind wasn't sure about. Now it was different. This wasn't just a feeling anymore. It was something he could point to, something they both shared. He even started looking in the mirror, staring at his own birthmark, tracing it with his finger. He imagined a line connecting his mark to his, like a secret signal that no one else could see. Victoria still acted distant, and the house was still quiet. But in Noah's world, everything was shifting. Noah didn't confront Albert about the mark again. He knew better now. He understood that he couldn't talk about certain things, that there were rules he was forced to follow. But he also knew he couldn't hide what his heart felt. When he brushed his hair, when he tucked him in at night, when he stayed up all night taking care of him, those actions said more than words ever could. He started thinking about the reasons why he had to stay quiet. Maybe Victoria made him promise something. Maybe she threatened him. Maybe there was something in the past that forced him to pretend. Noah didn't know the full story, but he was sure of one thing. Albert wasn't just a kind man. He wasn't just a butler who cared. He was connected to him in a way that went beyond kindness. That Mark wasn't a coincidence. And for the first time in his life, Noah believed he had found a real clue about who his father truly was. The mansion still felt cold. Victoria's rules hadn't changed, but Noah didn't feel as lost anymore. He had something now, a piece of the puzzle that made sense. Every time he saw Albert now, he didn't just feel cared for. He felt linked. It wasn't just the stories at bedtime or the soup when he was sick. It was deeper than that. He remembered how fast Albert had reacted when he fell ill, how he stayed up all night, even when no one told him to. He remembered the way he froze when he saw his birthmark, the way his eyes filled with something close to fear or maybe guilt. Whatever it was real. The connection couldn't be denied anymore. Noah no longer needed to keep asking everyone about his father. Now he only wanted to understand what had happened in the past. What had made Albert stay silent? The mystery wasn't solved yet, but it had finally begun to unfold. That morning, Noah sat quietly at the breakfast table. The long table, as usual, had plates of eggs, toast, fruit, and orange juice, arranged neatly by the staff. Victoria was already reading the newspaper and sipping her coffee, barely looking at her son. Noah didn't touch his food. He stared at his mother, his small hands resting on the table. Then, in a calm but direct voice, he asked, "Why does Albert have the same mark as me? Is he part of my family?" Victoria froze. Her eyes stayed on the paper for a moment. And then she slowly looked up. Her face tightened. There was a short silence before she spoke. And when she did, her tone was cold and sharp. "That doesn't mean anything," she said. "Stop with these ideas. It's all nonsense." Noah didn't back down. He asked again, louder this time. "Then who is my real dad?" Victoria stood up quickly, pushing the chair back with force. "Enough," she said, and walked away. Noah stayed at the table alone, staring at his plate. He wasn't hungry anymore, kept thinking about his mother's reaction. Victoria didn't answer the question. She got angry and walked out. It said more than words. Noah had never seen her so nervous before. Usually Victoria stayed calm and in control, but now she looked scared. Noah felt something shift inside him. He wasn't just guessing anymore. He had asked a real question, and it made his mother uncomfortable. That meant he was getting close to the truth. He thought about the mark again, the one he had on his neck, and the one Albert had in the exact same place. That wasn't a simple coincidence. He thought back to Albert's reaction when he touched his neck during the fever. He didn't deny it. He didn't explain it either. Noah knew there was something real going on. He just had to keep pushing until someone finally told him everything. Later that afternoon, the house was quieter than usual. Victoria had gone out for a meeting, and most of the staff were busy with their chores. Noah waited until the hallway was empty before walking softly to the laundry room. Albert was folding towels and placing them in neat piles. He looked tired and his hands moved slowly. Noah stood in the doorway for a few seconds before speaking. "Albert," he said quietly. He turned around with a smile, but it faded when he saw his serious face. He walked closer and stood right in front of him. He didn't waste time. "Are you my dad?" he asked, his voice calm but clear. Albert froze, holding a towel in midair. His eyes filled with tears almost instantly. He dropped the towel and fell to his knees, hugging him tightly. He didn't say a word, just cried and held him like he never wanted to let go. And Noah didn't pull away. He stayed in his arms. For a long time, they stayed there like that. Just the two of them sitting on the floor. Noah didn't need him to say anything. His hug, the way he cried, the way he held him, it all said more than words could. He felt him shaking. He could feel his tears on his shoulder. And even though he didn't cry himself, something heavy inside him finally started to lift. It was like his heart already knew the truth, and now it had been confirmed. Albert was his father. Maybe the world didn't know. Maybe Victoria didn't want it to be said. but Noah knew now. Albert pulled back slightly and looked at him.
Hi.
His face was red, his eyes still wet, and he opened his mouth to speak. But no words came out. He just held his face in his hands and nodded very slowly, as if to say yes without actually saying it. That small nod was enough for Noah. From that moment on, everything looked different to him. He walked through the house, seeing things with new eyes. Every time Albert helped him, smiled at him, or even just passed him in the hallway, it had new meaning. He wasn't just a butler. He wasn't just someone kind who took care of him. He was his father. He now saw all the clues he had missed before, the way he always protected him, how he knew exactly what made him feel better, how he never left his side when he was sick. All those moments meant something more now. It also explained Victoria's behavior. Victoria didn't want Noah to know the truth. Maybe she was ashamed or angry or scared. Whatever the reason, Noah was sure now that his mother had been hiding something very important. But Noah didn't feel confused anymore. The biggest question he had ever asked finally had an answer, even if it came without words. Later that evening, Noah sat alone in his room. The lights were off except for the small lamp on his nightstand. He held his notebook on his lap, flipping through the pages filled with drawings, thoughts, and questions he had written over the months. All the old questions about his father were there, circled and underlined. Now, he grabbed a pencil and drew a simple check mark next to one of them. Is Albert my dad? He looked at the page and smiled softly. He didn't need to ask anymore. He didn't need to wonder. That hug, that silence, that moment on the laundry room floor, it was enough. It gave him the truth he had been searching for. Victoria could keep avoiding it. The staff could keep quiet. But Noah knew now. As he closed the notebook and placed it beside his bed, he felt more sure of himself than ever. The doubt was gone. The truth was clear, and that changed everything. Victoria stood by the window in her office, looking out with a serious expression. She didn't seem calm, she looked tense, almost angry. On her desk were papers, contracts, and files, but she wasn't focused on any of them. She had called Albert to speak with him, and when he entered the room, he could feel the pressure. The door closed behind him, and Victoria didn't waste time. We need to talk, she said, her voice firm. Noah's asking questions, and I know it's because of you. Albert didn't answer at first. He looked down at the floor. Victoria stepped closer. If you tell him the truth, if you say anything, you'll lose everything. Your job, your place here, you won't see him again. Albert's eyes filled with tears. He already suspects Victoria. He's not a baby anymore. Victoria shook her head. You know why you had to stay quiet? I was about to close huge deals. Your presence would have destroyed everything. Hearing those words again brought back the memory of the worst day in his life. He remembered clearly the moment he was told he couldn't be a father to his own son. Not in public, not in any official way. Victoria had looked him straight in the eye back then and said that if he wanted to be near Noah, he would have to accept the role of a butler. No name on paper, no title, no rights, just the chance to stay close, even if it meant hiding the truth. Albert had agreed, even though it hurt deeply. That memory never left him. He said it was temporary, he whispered. Now. He said I could tell him one day. Victoria didn't respond right away. She walked back to her chair, sat down, and began organizing her papers again, like the conversation was over. You had a choice, she said coldly. You chose this life. Stick to it. I chose it because I love him, he said softly, his voice shaking. I didn't care about titles or money. I just wanted to be with him. Victoria looked up at him again, this time with less anger, but no sympathy. I had a reputation to protect, she said. Investors, meetings, media. If they found out I had a child with a man who worked here, it would have destroyed everything. Albert couldn't believe what he was hearing. After all these years, she still cared more about her image than about her son's right to know the truth. You care more about your business than your own child? He asked, shocked. I care about stability, she answered. And if you say one word to Noah, you won't be around to see him grow up? The threat was clear. She wasn't just warning him. She was reminding him of how much power she still had. Albert left the office feeling sick. His legs were heavy as he walked down the hallway. Each step reminded him of the secret he had carried for so long. He had done everything for Noah. Every night he stayed by his side when he had nightmares. Every meal he made with care, every birthday he planned quietly in the background. He had done it all without being able to call him son, and yet he never once stopped loving him, not even when he called him by his first name. Not even when he asked about his father and he had to pretend he didn't know. But now things were changing. Noah wasn't little anymore. He was starting to see the truth for himself. The questions were getting harder to avoid, and Albert knew he wouldn't be able to hold back much longer. He was tired of lying. He was tired of hiding. The fear that Victoria had used to control him was starting to lose its grip. That night, Albert sat alone in his small room, staring at a photo he kept hidden in his drawer. It was the only picture he had of Noah as a baby, taken before the arrangement with Victoria was made. In the photo, he was holding him, smiling. Remembered how light he felt in his arms and how happy he was before things became complicated. Back then, he believed that love was enough to protect them both. But now he saw how much damage silence had done. Noah had grown up full of doubts. He had cried without knowing why. He had asked questions that no one would answer, and he had been forced to stand by, pretending everything was normal. Albert picked up the photo and pressed it to his chest. He whispered to himself, "I'm sorry." He had wanted to keep him safe, but maybe keeping the secret had hurt him more. Maybe it was time to choose truth over fear. As Albert looked out his window, he realized the weight he carried was no longer bearable. Couldn't keep doing this. Watching Noah suffer, watching him search for answers with no help. He deserved to know who he was. Deserved to know who he was. Victoria's threat still scared him, but something had changed. Noah had grown stronger. He had started putting the pieces together. Now Albert was beginning to believe that telling the truth wasn't just a risk. It was a necessity. Couldn't keep pretending forever. One day soon, Noah would ask again, and this time, he would have to give him a real answer. The fear of losing him had kept him quiet, but the fear of letting him live in confusion was stronger now. He wiped his tears. He made a silent promise to himself. The past was painful, but it couldn't stay hidden forever. He knew deep inside he couldn't keep the secret for much longer. Noah had been feeling uneasy for days. Something wasn't right. Albert had been acting more nervous, and Victoria was even more distant than usual. Noah started watching both of them more carefully. He noticed the way Albert avoided eye contact when he brought up anything about his past. He also saw how his mother always ended conversations quickly when certain topics came up. One afternoon, Noah walked slowly down the stairs, but stopped when he heard voices. He crouched behind the staircase, staying completely still. From where he hid, he could hear Victoria talking to Albert. Her voice was low but firm. "You know what would happen if he finds out?" Victoria said. "If this gets out, we'll lose everything. He can never discover the truth." Albert said nothing. Noah's heart raced. He didn't understand every word, but the word discover stood out. Discover what? Discover who? That word stuck in his head like glue. Something was being kept from him, and he knew it now. Noah stayed hidden for a few more seconds, listening, but the conversation ended quickly. He tiptoed back upstairs, his mind spinning. What was it that his mother didn't want him to discover? Why did Albert look so scared when Victoria spoke to him like that? Felt like everyone in the house knew something he didn't. That night, Noah couldn't sleep. He kept thinking about what he heard. He didn't understand all of it, but it confirmed what he already felt. There was a secret, and it was about him. After turning in bed for a long time, he sat up, grabbed his notebook, and wrote one sentence. What does my mother not want me to find out? The question stayed in his head like an alarm. He decided it was time to ask again. He couldn't keep pretending. Everything was okay. He needed to know the truth. He had waited too long already, and this time he was ready to push harder. The next morning, Noah looked for the right moment to talk to Albert. He waited until he was alone in the laundry room, folding clothes in silence. He walked in slowly and stood beside him. "Albert," he said, looking up at him, "can we talk?" He nodded and smiled gently, but his hands didn't stop folding. "You're hiding something from me?" Noah said firmly. Heard Mom say. "I can't discover something." "What is it?" "I think you're my dad. I feel it. I know it." Albert's hands stopped moving. He closed his eyes for a moment, and tears rolled down his face. He didn't answer right away. Noah stepped closer. "Please, just tell me the truth." Albert knelt in front of him, took his hands in his, and whispered, "I wish I could tell you everything, Noah. I really do." His voice cracked, pulled him into a hug, holding him tight. Noah didn't cry, but inside he was shaking. He hadn't denied it. Albert's reaction gave Noah more certainty than any spoken answer. He could feel it in the way he held him, tight, warm, and full of emotion. It wasn't just a hug. It was the kind of hug only a father gives his child. He didn't ask anything else in that moment. He stayed still in his arms, listening to his quiet sobs. Could feel his chest moving as he cried. His words had been few, but his silence said even more. He wanted to tell him he was just afraid, probably because of Victoria. Noah now understood that the truth was real, and it was being locked away. He also realized that if he wanted answers, he would need to find them himself. Albert would never lie to him, but he was trapped. He was scared of what might happen if he told him too much. Noah let him go slowly, looked into his eyes, and made up his mind. He was going to look for proof. The rest of the day, Noah kept thinking. He replayed the moment behind the stairs. Again and again. He thought about the word reputation that Victoria used. What did that mean? Why would Noah knowing the truth ruin anything? He remembered his mother's cold response at breakfast and how angry she got when Noah brought up Albert. That wasn't normal. Mother should want her son to know about his father, not hide him. Noah was sure everything Victoria said was a cover-up. From now on, Noah stopped trusting her words. If his mother said something, Noah would question it. If his mother told him not to do something, Noah would wonder why. His trust in Victoria was broken. Noah started planning in his head. He would go through old rooms, drawers, anywhere that might have a clue. Maybe there were pictures hidden, maybe papers, maybe even letters. He wasn't just a curious boy anymore. He was searching for the truth. That night, Noah sat in bed with the light off. He wasn't tired. His body was still, but his mind was wide awake. He remembered how many times he had asked simple questions and got nothing. In return, now it all made sense. The strange looks, the silence, the way people changed the subject, was all part of the secret, a secret he was never supposed to find out. But it was too late now. He had heard enough. He had felt enough. The truth was right there, just behind the door, and he was going to open it no matter what. He didn't blame Albert. In fact, he loved him more now. He'd been doing the best he could in a bad situation. But Victoria, that was different. Noah no longer saw her as a guide or protector. Now, Victoria was the one hiding the truth. Noah promised himself that the next time he found something suspicious, he wouldn't ignore it. He was ready. Noah wasn't supposed to be in the office that day. Victoria had left in a rush, and the door was left slightly open. The room was usually off limits, filled with books, papers, and important-looking objects. But Noah was bored and curious. He stepped in slowly, running his fingers across the old desk, touching pens, paperweights, and picture frames. Nothing looked interesting until he knocked over a pile of books while reaching for a pencil. As he picked them up, he noticed a small, dusty box tucked behind the row of books. It looked forgotten. Carefully, he pulled it out and sat on the floor. The box was metal, old, and slightly dented. Opened the lid and found something strange, a round, gold-colored medallion. He held it in his hands, noticing its weight. When he opened it, he saw a photo inside. One side showed a young Albert smiling, standing next to a much younger Victoria. On the other side, there was a short message, "For our baby who is coming." His fingers traced the words again and again. "For our baby who is coming." He read it slowly, trying to understand exactly what it meant. There was no doubt in his mind. That message was about him. The photo, the writing, the fact that it had been hidden away. It all connected. He didn't feel confused. Felt something closer to shock, but also relief. For the first time, he was holding something real, not just a feeling, not just a guess. This was a piece of his history. He stood up quickly, gripping the medallion tightly, and rushed out of the office. He didn't want to wait. He had to talk to Albert immediately. He was in the kitchen wiping the counter when Noah entered. He walked straight to him and placed the open medallion in his hand. "Is this true?" he asked, looking him in the eyes. Albert looked down at it, and then he started to cry. He didn't try to hide his face or hold back the tears. This time, he dropped the cloth he was holding and sank slowly into the chair behind him. Noah stood still, waiting. Albert held the medallion with both hands, his thumbs gently rubbing the edges. "Yes," he said quietly through his tears. That one word said everything. Noah didn't need more. I felt a strange mix of emotions. Sadness, joy, anger, and peace, all happening at once. He wiped his eyes and tried to say more, but just as he opened his mouth to speak again, the door to the kitchen slammed open. Victoria stormed in. Her face was red with rage. She looked at Noah, then at Albert, then at the medallion. Without saying a word, she stepped forward, yanked it out of Noah's hands, and turned toward Albert. "How dare you?" she shouted. Her voice echoed. "You promised to stay quiet." Albert didn't move. Noah stood in front of him. This time, not afraid. Victoria was shaking with anger. She pointed at Albert and continued yelling, "You broke the deal. I told you. It was never supposed to know." Albert didn't answer. He stayed silent, but his eyes were wet and locked on Noah. Victoria turned to Noah, still gripping the medallion. "This means nothing," she said. "It's just an old picture." But Noah didn't believe her anymore. He had seen the truth. It's the message in the medallion, the way Albert reacted, the way Victoria panicked. It was all too real to ignore. "You lied to me," Noah said firmly. All this time, Victoria tried to respond, but Noah stepped back closer to Albert. "He's my dad," he said. "I don't care what you say anymore." Albert covered his mouth, sobbing again. Victoria threw the medallion on the table and left the room, slamming the door behind her. The room stayed quiet. Noah walked over, picked up the medallion again, and placed it gently in Albert's hands. "I believe you," he whispered. Albert looked at Noah like he was seeing him for the first time. His tears slowed and he nodded silently. There was no need to hide anymore. Noah knew he had the proof. He pulled him close and hugged him tight. This hug felt different than all the others. It wasn't full of worry or fear. It was full of truth. For a long time, neither of them said anything. They didn't need to. After a few minutes, Albert whispered, "I always wanted to tell you. I just wasn't allowed." Noah nodded. "I understand," he replied. "But now I know." The medallion stayed in Albert's hands, as if it had finally returned to where it belonged. Noah sat next to him and held his hand. They were quiet, but everything had changed. For years, they lived under a lie. But that small object had brought the truth out. Nothing could erase what Noah saw, and nothing Victoria said could change how he felt now. The day had started like any other, but now everything was different. Noah had entered that office out of curiosity. He had knocked over some books by accident. And behind those books, he had found a box that changed his life. The medallion wasn't just an object. It was a piece of the past, proof of a hidden truth, a connection that no one could deny anymore. The picture of Albert and Victoria smiling together, and the message written with love. It was meant for Noah all along. Victoria could scream, lie, and even try to take it away, but she couldn't change what it meant. Noah had seen enough. He had heard enough, and now he had touched the truth as he sat with Albert. Watching him hold the medallion close to his chest, he no longer felt lost. Albert wasn't just a kind man who cared for him. He was his father. That fact was no longer a guess. It was real. It was proven. Noah stood in the middle of the living room, gripping the medallion tightly in his hand. His heart was beating fast, but his face was calm. Victoria was sitting on the couch reading the newspaper like everything was normal. Noah took a deep breath and walked closer. "We need to talk," he said. Noah raised the medallion so his mother could see it. "You lied to me," he said, his voice clear. "You lied my whole life. Why did you hide my father from me?" Victoria opened her mouth, but said nothing. She stared at the object in Noah's hand. Realizing this moment had finally come, Noah didn't wait. "Why did you do it? Why did you make me think he was just the butler?" Victoria sighed heavily. Her hands were shaking now. The usual power in her voice was gone. "'Cause I thought I was protecting you," she finally answered. Victoria stood up slowly, walking toward Noah. "I did what I had to do," she said, trying to stay calm. "Albert is your father, yes, but I didn't want you to grow up in the middle of something messy. I didn't want the media, the business world, everyone asking questions. I've worked my whole life to build a reputation, to keep our name strong." Noah didn't flinch. He looked straight at his mother. "So you picked your name, your company, your success, instead of telling me the truth? You picked money instead of your own son." Victoria frowned. "It's not that simple. Noah's hands were shaking now. It is for me. You let me grow up thinking my father didn't exist. You let me believe he didn't care, that he wasn't part of my life. Victoria looked away, unable to meet Noah's eyes. Walls of control she had always built around her were starting to fall apart. She looked smaller now, less sure. Tears welled up in Noah's eyes. He didn't try to wipe them away. He wanted his mother to see his pain. "Do you even understand what you've done to me?" he asked, voice breaking. "I had questions for years. I cried for someone I thought didn't want me, and he was here the whole time. You let him pretend to be a servant while I begged to know who my dad was." Victoria reached out a hand. "Noah, I didn't mean for it to be like this. I was trying to keep things peaceful." But Noah stepped back. "You weren't trying to keep anything peaceful. You were trying to keep your image clean." At that moment, Albert entered the room. He saw the two standing there, Noah hurt, Victoria speechless. Without hesitation, he walked over and put his arms around Noah. This time, he didn't care who was watching. He held him with all the love he had hidden for years, and Noah hugged him back. Albert stood tall, no longer afraid of Victoria's judgment or threats. He had stayed silent for too long, but now the truth was out, and he wasn't going to pretend anymore. Noah stayed close to his side. Victoria, seeing them together like that, looked helpless. For years, she had controlled everything. What was said, what was done, who stayed close, who stayed silent. But now, nothing she said could fix this. "I thought I was doing what was best," she said again weakly. Albert looked at her and answered calmly, "No, you were doing what was best for you." Victoria looked down. She had no more words. Noah saw her clearly now, not as a powerful woman, not as a strong figure, but as someone who had been afraid to face the truth. The room was quiet, no shouting, no more lies, just a broken silence that showed how far things had gone. Noah now understood who his mother really was and who she wasn't. Noah didn't feel better, but he did feel free. The truth hurt, but it also cleared away the confusion. He had lived in doubt for so long, always wondering, always guessing. Now he knew, and now that he knew, he could begin to move forward. He looked at Albert. His eyes were tired but full of love. "I believe you," he whispered again. He held his hand. Victoria watched them from across the room, silent. The power she had once used to control everyone around her didn't work anymore. Her secrets were no longer hidden. The medallion, the one thing she had tried to keep buried, had brought the truth to light. Noah had found it, faced the lies, and now stood stronger than before. Victoria tried one last time. "Maybe we can talk about this calmly later." Noah didn't respond. He turned toward the stairs with Albert beside him. The conversation was over. What needed to be said had already been said. Nothing more mattered now. As Noah walked up the stairs with Albert at his side, he glanced back one last time. Victoria was still standing there alone. For the first time, she looked different, not like the powerful woman who controlled the house, but like someone who had lost everything that really mattered. Noah didn't feel hate, didn't feel revenge. He just saw the truth. His mother had built a life of silence, image, and pride. But none of that could replace love, honesty, or family. Downed. And now all of Victoria's power couldn't erase what had been done. Noah held the medallion tightly in his hand, not because he needed proof anymore, but because it reminded him of what was real. Albert wasn't just a part of his life. He was the center of it. As they reached the top of the stairs, Noah felt something change inside. He had faced his biggest fear. And for the first time, he saw his mother for who she truly was, vulnerable and broken. Everything changed after the truth came out. From that day forward, Albert was no longer treated as just a worker in the house. The other staff stopped calling him by title, and even Victoria, though silently, backed off from treating him like someone beneath her. He no longer served meals in silence or cleaned rooms while hiding his connection to his son. Instead, he helped Noah with his homework, sat beside him during dinner, and tucked him into bed without pretending it was part of his job. Noah felt different too. For the first time in his life, he felt like he truly belonged to someone. That quiet feeling of emptiness that used to follow him around was slowly disappearing. Still, as happy as he was to be close to Albert, he couldn't ignore the sadness he felt about the years that had been lost. Years they could never get back, no matter what happened. Now, Noah tried to enjoy the new moments with Albert. They spent time walking through the garden, talking about simple things and laughing in ways they never could before. But sometimes, even in the middle of these peaceful moments, Noah would grow quiet. Albert noticed. He understood that he was still processing everything. One afternoon, he finally said what he had been feeling inside. "Why did we waste so much time, Dad?" he asked, his voice soft. Albert didn't have an easy answer. He held his hand and said, "I did the best I could with what I had, but I wish things had been different too." It wasn't anger Noah felt. It was grief for the time that was stolen from them. Even though they were together now, he still remembered the birthdays, holidays, and lonely nights when he didn't know he was his father. Albert promised him they would make new memories now, better ones, and never be forced apart again. That was his vow. While Noah and Albert were trying to heal, Victoria didn't accept the new reality so easily. She was no longer the respected, untouchable woman of the house. Her power didn't work the way it used to. Noah no longer looked up to her or trusted her. That loss hurt Victoria more than she expected. She tried to fix things by acting like nothing had happened. She offered Noah gifts, suggested family, dinners, and tried to pull Albert back into old routines. But nothing worked. Noah was polite, but distant. He didn't forget what Victoria had done. The woman who once demanded silence and obedience was now being ignored by her own son. Victoria grew frustrated and angry. One evening, she raised her voice at Albert and accused him of turning Noah against her. "You poisoned him with your story," she said. Albert didn't back down. "You did that yourself," he replied calmly. Noah, hearing it all, stepped in. "I chose him," he said, "not because of stories, because he's my dad." Victoria, feeling cornered, started threatening legal action. She called lawyers, made comments about custody, and even said things like, "He's still my son, and I have rights." Albert stayed calm, but Noah was tired of the fighting. During one of the worst arguments, Victoria yelled, "I won't lose him." Noah stepped forward and said firmly, "You already did." That moment hit hard. Victoria stood frozen. The boy who used to run to her was now standing against her. Noah made it clear he wasn't going anywhere without Albert. No court, no threats, and no deals would make him leave his side. Albert held him close, proud, but sad that things had come to this. Victoria had chances to make things right, but every time she chose pride over love, and now she was paying the price. The house that used to feel controlled and perfect now felt broken, divided, but Noah didn't care anymore. He knew where he belonged, and it wasn't with lies. Over time, the shouting stopped. Victoria grew quiet. She no longer barked orders at the staff or walked around like a queen. She stayed in her office most days, barely talking to anyone. Noah still saw her sometimes, but the connection between them had faded. It wasn't hatred, it was distance. There were no more attempts to win him over. Victoria seemed to understand that something had been lost forever. Meanwhile, Noah and Albert focused on building something new. They took small steps, cooking together, going to the park, even planning a trip to visit his old hometown. Albert began smiling more.
Noah started laughing without forcing it.
They were becoming a real family, not one based on roles or secrets, but on truth. There were still painful memories, but they were no longer heavier than the hope they had. Albert would never again pretend. Noah would never again question his place in his life. Together, they started to imagine what a better future might look like. Even though the future was still full of unknowns, one thing was certain. No amount of money, power, or control could replace the love between a father and his child. That love had survived silence, fear, and years of distance. It had stayed alive through bedtime stories, quiet hugs, and whispered lullabies, even when Noah didn't know who he really was. Now that everything was in the open, that love had become stronger. Victoria had tried to buy peace with control, but in the end, she was left alone with her decisions. Albert and Noah, on the other hand, stood side by side, ready to move forward. Maybe they would leave the mansion someday. Maybe they'd start a new life somewhere else. The future didn't have to be clear, it just had to be honest. What mattered now was that Noah no longer had to ask who his father was. He knew, and he had chosen him. Nothing Victoria could do would ever change that again. Finally, we've reached the end of this story. Extremely happy that you've made it this far. Thank you very much for watching. Comment below what you thought and what was the best or worst part. Don't forget to subscribe. Till next time.